So, welcome to the show, Sergeant Rob. Introduce yourself to everybody.
Thanks, Andy. My name is Sergeant Rob Disario. I'm a supervisor for the Brookline Police Department in Massachusetts.
Very cool. So, how long have you been in law enforcement and what led you down this career path?
So, law enforcement specific, I've been 23 years. It'll be 23 years this November, and I was less than a year out of college before I got hired, which was lucky. I was young. I was relatively young. I was 23 years old coming out of the academy, and of course, I was full of energy and ready to save the world. But before that, I did security, and I was a private investigator for it was basically a surveillance operative for a company in Massachusetts. But obviously before that, I was in college, just working like security and stuff like that. But
So, this is something that you have just always found yourself just kind of gravitating to and being something that you're just naturally good at?
I don't know how good I am, but I'd say it's definitely something that I wanted to do. So, like, I grew up in remember the old show, Cops? I mean, it's still on today, but I mean, like, I grew up watching that, and I knew a lot of the cops in my neighborhood. It's a relatively urban environment, and we lived in an apartment, and I knew all the cops and they would come by all the time because they had, at the time, Brookline Police had a very good community policing. We were like one of the first in the nation to have like a big community policing initiative. And so they used to come around to us all the time. And that's how I got to know them. And I said, you know what? It's definitely what I want to do. So it just was a natural thing. And ever since I was probably about 12, 13 years old, I knew I wanted to do it.
Very cool. So, kind of give me and my audience the rundown of the typical day for a police officer. There, obviously, being a sergeant, being a supervisor, you have a lot of different tasks that you have to take care of. But what's a typical day look like for a police officer there?
So basically, it's all shift work, right? So like any kind of shift work, nurses work, doctors, EMTs, firefighters, we all work shift work. So especially the newer officers, you go to the nights because that's the most undesirable shift. But it's relatively the same. You come in, you always have to come in wearing your civilian clothes, and they give you a locker room because you don't want to be one of those guys that's constantly wearing your uniform. So you come in, you get changed in the locker room, and you go down a roll call. It's kind of like taking attendance in grade school. But basically, they tell you where you're going to be assigned. So depending on what department you work for, the town is broken up into several different sections. We have 9 different sections in Brookline. It's a relatively small town, but our population is a lot more than your average town. So you're assigned to that area. You go grab your cruiser, whatever cruiser you're assigned. That's always a fun game, right? Trying to find where your cruiser is. Who knows, with a guy who had it before you parked it. And so then you just make sure you got everything in there, and you just hit the street. You flip your radio on, and essentially it's 8 hours managing your own time. And as long as you answer your calls, you answer the radio, and you do your reports, nobody bothers you. It's actually a really fun job, in terms of like, if you're good at time management, and you can do, like, if you can be proactive and you can do the job by yourself without having to be micromanaged.
Yeah, that sounds
Anybody who can do that, he will be successful.
very good. And like, there's no like typical, one day looks exactly like the other. There's always going to be some random call from, a worst case scenario to, hey, somebody's goat has gotten loose in the street, and you're the guy who's got to go get it, right?
And we actually had a donkey one time got loose. We have a farm in the south side of town. It's called Allendale Farm. It's a small, but it is a working farm. We had 2 donkeys get out one time. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it is, it's all about mindset, right? So you show up to work knowing that you're going to have a standard amount of like typical calls. Like, those are your medical emergencies, right? Somebody's sick, somebody fell, we have a large elderly population in my town where, we have a lot of people where the police are on the street all the time. Somebody's choking, somebody's having a heart attack. We're there right away. We apply to defib. We do a lot of like first, EMT, first responder training. So you're going to get those calls, guaranteed. You're going to get the parking complaints. You know what I mean? They didn't show that stuff on Cops, Andy. Where they get the parking complaint, and you have to go and tow the car from blocking the driveway. You're going to get those every day. It's a different pattern. I guess there's no pattern. There's a different, series of things that you have to do in order to get through the day. And it's all in what you make it. Policing has changed over the last, some odd years, where when I worked nights, you were free to do whatever you wanted. So we were very proactive. Me and my team on nights, we were very proactive. So we'd be getting drunk drivers. We'd be getting drugs, drug deals. We'd go look for like the certain hot spots where people were acting a fool, graffiti taggers that come out at night. So you could be very proactive. As long as your radio is on, you got to make sure you get that medical call and you handle the medical call. So that's basically that. There is no typical day, which is good for some people, but some people like the routine. They like to come in and do the same exact thing, and so this probably wouldn't be a good fit for them.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense to me. And yeah, just every day is going to be different. You don't know what you're going to have and all that stuff. I think that would kind of be exciting. But you made a comment just a second ago. You've done this for 23 years now, right? Um, policing, has kind of changed. Kind of give me your perspective on how policing has changed, especially with a lot of the things that we've seen like nationwide, like over the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's hard. It's hard to say. Put your thumb on what exactly changed, but you have to understand, Andy. When I graduated the academy, it was November of 2001. So
Mm,
September 11th just happened. So when I got out, everybody was just so appreciative and welcoming. People were buying us coffees. I mean, not to say we can accept like gratuities or anything like that, but people were just so nice. So I always thought that was normal when I first the academy. And I said, but the old timers, the dinosaurs, were like, no, 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 come on, kid, this will all go away after a while. And eventually it did. We're unique in Brookline that we have a fairly good relationship with the residents. The people that we deal with on a common basis. But like you say, the last couple of years, let's see, it's 2024 now. 4 years ago, we were affected just like every other police department in the country about all that stuff that went down, and the rebel. I mean, I like to call it's the rebellion against the police more than anything. And they had. The narrative was, defund the police, cut their budget, and they listened. The people making the decisions listened. It's really hard for us. I mean, we had protests right in front of our police station where they would come out and it got really, really tense. And these are people that we thought we had a really good relationship with, and they all came out of the woodwork. And you got to remember, though, Andy, nobody had anything really to do because it was during COVID. Like a lot of people weren't working, a lot of people were working from home, and they were, and I hate to say this, but they were really looking for something to do.
right.
And
Mm,
I don't know what's changed. I don't know if it's something we're doing differently or society's doing something differently, but they're a lot more vocal now in their support. And I'll give you an example. So I was in patrol up until 2022, and I got reassigned, and one of my major functions was social media. And as you saw I create a lot of content, a lot of
mhm.
videos of me, which I don't care for. Although my wife will tell you that I love watching myself on video. I kind of got forced into that. So we started putting content out, just anything we could update the public with, traffic crashes, and we would actually show video of the traffic crashes, like special events and stuff, like just regular stuff. And I was pumping that content out. And you would see probably 60% of the comments on Facebook were negative.
Mhm.
60%, like more than half people were like, oh, and they would be calling us names. And of course, we couldn't do anything about it. We couldn't edit those comments out. We just had to leave them. And nobody would say anything. Nobody would support. I mean, there'd be a couple people in there, which we appreciated at the time because it was really hard to come out in support of the police. And now, Andy, I post something now, 100% of it is all positive. And I think it was one of the things is like police departments got wise and they said, listen, if we don't set the narrative for ourselves, other people are going to set the narrative for us. And I think that was what happened during COVID and during the anti-police stuff. It's like we kind of sat back and we said, okay, let's let this stuff all happen. Whereas we should have been a little more proactive and said, hey, listen, and defended ourselves, but we were afraid to defend ourselves. Like we had nothing to do with anything that happened in Minneapolis. We had nothing to do with anything that happened in all these cities or these places, but yet we were taking the brunt of it. And it was a very confusing time. So I don't think we really knew what to do. And when I say we, I mean like law enforcement in general, we just kind of sat back. But finally, like my boss came to me when I got this job and says, listen, I don't care what you put out, but it's got to be good. It's got to be informative and it's got to set the narrative. And that's essentially what we did.
Very good. So that kind of leads me into my next question here. What are the biggest challenges that police departments have when you are building relationships with the communities today here in 2024?
Law enforcement took for granted that we are going to do the right thing all the time. And you know what, public? You don't need to know what we're doing in here. And I think that was a mistake. And we worked on that premise forever. But that's so wrong. We need them to come in and see what we do. And we want, hey, listen, come on in. Like we give tours on a weekly basis of people that want to come in and see the police station. They don't, there's a lot of people that don't even know that we have jail cells. We have jail cells downstairs in the basement. We bring the prisoner in the cell report and we bring them into the jail cell. Like, oh, you have jail cells? Like, yes, we're a police department. We have jail cells. So, but I think it's all about opening up. It's about being, I don't want to sound cliche, but just being transparent. And I know that's a very cliche term, but it's about being transparent, showing them, hey, listen, this is what we're doing. And you know what? When there is a complaint that comes in, we have internal affairs, a public professional responsibility office. And not to say we were hiding anything, but we would conduct our investigation and then we would submit it to the town. But people said, no, it's stupid. What are you doing? Now, what we do is we share while we're doing the investigation, we bring in people from the town and say, okay, this is where we're at, just so that they can see it and say, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, all right, keep going with this, X, Y, Z. So we're not hiding anything. And I think that's not to say we were ever hiding anything before, Andy, but I think we were very closed. And that goes along with like the assumptions that people make about us, right? So like one of the things that is building a relationship with the community is they have a lot of assumptions about us. They think we like to go out there and write tickets. We like to arrest people. We don't, because it just means we got to do work. I don't want to do work. I want to do less work. But like, about the shooting of unarmed men and stuff like that. And like, well, they were out there hunting us and they're hunting us. We took that really personally because no, the last thing we want to do is shoot somebody or we want to get into a physical altercation. Now, is there a group of people, police officers out there that are like, younger that are looking for action? Yeah, there will always be that. But us dinosaurs, we don't want to get involved in that stuff. We're trying to avoid that. And that's a lot of times like you'll get involved with somebody who you're kind of like, ugh, and you tell them, listen, the last thing I want to do, it's Friday afternoon. The court is closed. The last thing I want to do is lock you up. So please help me. Give me what I need. And I promise you, I'll let you go or I'll summons you into court. You know what I mean? So I think it's so. Long story short, it's the assumptions that people make about us. But also, Andy, it's the assumptions that we make about people. So we make assumptions about people all the time, whether they're right or wrong. We assume things about people. And I'll give you as an example.
Okay.
Let's say we had a robbery that just occurred or some sort of incident that just occurred, and Andy's driving down the street in a black pickup truck. Well, the description we had for the fleeing vehicle is a black pickup truck. And I see Andy in that area. And so I say, oh, yeah, I'm going to stop that guy. Now, I've already made an assumption about that guy. Now, I'm not saying you're it, but there's a pretty good chance that black pickup truck gets something to do with it. So anyway, so I stopped the vehicle. Now, there's a couple of things that I'm going to do, knowing, depending on the incident, let's say it was a violent incident with a gun or something. I'm either going to prone you out, verbal commands and prone you out, or I'm going to tactfully approach you. So I've made several assumptions about you, and I haven't even spoken to you yet. And so police officers will treat you based on the situation that we're dealing with. And unfortunately, people see that and they say, well, he was rude or he was aggressive. No, 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 no. I'm using my tactics that I was trained to do to safely dissolve this situation. And I'm going to treat you that way unless prove otherwise that you had nothing to do with it. I'm just Andy and I'm just going to pick up my kids from school. Okay, right. Good enough. Then we drop the guard because we are constantly on guard. Mm-hmm. Anytime we make a traffic stop, anytime we shag a call, anytime, we are constantly on guard. But people interpret that differently. They make assumptions about us because we are constantly on guard. And we make assumptions about you. You know, let's say I'm at a community event and I see Mrs. Jones coming over to me, and Mrs. Jones wants to complain about, a car that's parked in front of her house for a lot of things. Mrs. Jones, and you're like, oh, Mrs. Jones, I'm at a community event. I really can't deal with this right now. You know what I mean? So so that's one of the things. That's a long answer to building the relationship with the community is assumptions. Mm-hmm. Understanding that we are going to make assumptions about you, just like you're going to make assumptions about us.
Right. And that's just assumptions is part of what we do as humans. Like, that's just how our brains work. That's not, I don't want anybody listening to sit here and say, oh, Sergeant Rob here has admitted that all cops make assumptions and act on assumptions. No, that's just a human thing that we all do. We always make assumptions. Like, I make assumptions about people in traffic all the time. I think that everybody is stupid in traffic and I'm the only one who knows what's going on. That's the same kind of thing that we're dealing with here. It's not a legal assumption. It's just normal human behavior assumptions. So, yeah. So, like, what is something that you wish that every citizen knew about policing? What is something that you don't think something that we should know that we don't?
We don't, like I said, we don't want to write parking tickets. We don't want to tow cars. We don't want to make arrests. We really try to avoid doing a lot of those things. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. They think we're out there. And like I said, there will always be that fraction of people that the cops that do want to make arrests. They want to pad their stats, or they want to do X, Y, Z. But the vast majority of us, Andy, we want to do our job. We want to help people. We want to protect people, and we want to go home. And I know that sounds super cliche. But let me just say this, that my reaction to life has changed as yours has after I had kids.
Oh, yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
I think for that, let's see, 10 years that I was a cop before I had kids, I viewed the world differently than I do now. And I think, obviously it's cliche and stuff, but at the end of the day, I go pick them up from school. That's my best moment of the day right there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, you've kind of hinted at this in some of the things that you've said. How people respond to seeing you, I'm sure, is varied depending on what people's life experiences are. We just talked about these assumptions. But what do citizens need to be aware of when approaching an officer, either at a community event or they're eating at a restaurant, that sort of thing? What do we need to take in consideration when coming to talk to an officer?
I think the circumstances, right? Mm-hmm. I've had many incidents where I'm actively investigating a case. I'll be on the side of the road. I'll have somebody, I'll be interviewing this guy, and by no fault of their own, they just see the uniform and they're like, can you give me directions to, such a, and you're like, oh my God, do you not see what's going on here? I have two guys prone out on the sidewalk. I got a tow truck. And we're willing to help anybody all the time, but know what the situation is at the time. And I think that when somebody approaches me, but don't ever be hesitant to approach the police officer, because, like I said, they want to help you and stuff. And I think, but like I say, like, going back to the assumptions thing, they assume that we're a bunch of, gruff, angry people because maybe we have a scowl on our face or something, and or like maybe we're dealing with something that we really don't want to be dealing with. and they'll match that kind of gruffness, block out orders or something, or they'll block out a question, and you're like, whoa. And I'll give you an example. I was writing parking tickets one time. This is a long time ago. I was in a sector car, and I was writing parking tickets, whatever, and I don't care, like whatever. And we got to remember what a parking ticket is. It's a tool of compliance. It's
Mm.
just a tool to make you comply with the parking regulation, whatever. And the lady saw me writing the parking tickets, and I was writing her car ticket, and she came full barrel screaming at me. And I just sat there, and of course, you just got to sit there and take it. And when she was done, she took a breath. I finally says, ma'am, let me begin by saying, I don't appreciate the way you approached me today.
Mm. Mm.
However, I'm willing to take this ticket back if you move off the crosswalk. And I think she, like, her face kind of settled out. She goes, ah, sorry. You know what I mean? It was kind of one of those moments. And I didn't want to patronize or anything, but I just kind of was like, first of all, you don't have to approach me like that. Excuse me, officer. I'm very sorry I parked there. I'm moving it now. You know what I mean? That could have been all it took, but whatever. But yeah, but I mean, I just think, understand the situation. Now, if you're at a fair, and like a fair, and there's always cops, security detail or something, hey, come on, chat our ear off. We love to hear from you. Like, we want to hear from, hey, I live down on such and such a road. Oh, really? Oh, my buddy lives down there. You know what I mean? So it's like, know the situation, I think, is the best advice I can give.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, so let me ask you this. So, from a civilian point of view, what are some tips that you can give me if I'm ever pulled over on the side of the road? How do I need to behave? What do I need to be aware of? Let's say I was going, 55 and a 45. You've pulled me over in my black pickup truck. What do I need to keep in mind as you're approaching the car?
No matter what happens, there's always an administrative way to handle everything. So I preface what I'm going to say by saying that there's always an administrative way to deal with any situation. I mean, I don't get pulled over anymore, but if I did, I mean, you know what I mean? Just because I drive like an old lady. If I get pulled over, it's just, you cooperate. Yes, yeah. You don't have to say sir or ma'am. You just, how's it going? Yeah, here you go. Here's your driver's license. Arguing is futile. People have bad days, and we understand that. But don't argue, because it's not going to end well. Even if the cop is angry, curmudgeon, barking out orders at you, you just kind of want to cooperate, because maybe he just came from a suicide, and he's just upset, and he's having, not to make excuses. I don't want to make excuses, but everybody has a bad day. So I just think the best advice is just to cooperate and go along with it. Now, with that said, he does something wrong. She does something wrong. She accuses you of doing something you didn't do, write you a ticket for something you don't think you did, was rude to you, swore at you. There's always an administrative way to deal with that. So just finish the interaction, because you're not going to win.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people, the public, they think they're going to argue their way out of a ticket. No way, man. You're going to get that ticket no matter what. Could be a warning, but you're going to get a ticket one way or another. That officer has a supervisor, and that police department has an office of professional responsibility, or so-called internal affairs. That police officer has a police chief. So there's always an avenue to say, listen, I've taken these calls as a patrol supervisor. I've taken these calls. I had one where they wanted to complain about the way the officer was driving, and they called dispatch. Have a supervisor call me. Perfect. So I called her back. I said, hey, what's the story? This officer was driving crazy. It's rush hour traffic. He was on the lights. I said, well, let me look up the call. I'm like, oh yeah. So that was for the baby choking. And I didn't lie or anything. I just read the CAD the way it was. And I said, and I was hoping that that officer would get there very quickly, because he's trained in how to get that choking baby, the item out of the choking baby's thing. And I think it kind of changed the way she kind of was like, but I will talk to him. I'll make sure he understands that when the blue lights are on, it's not a free pass. You got to be careful, and she goes, oh, all right. However, if you'd like to make a formal complaint, I can give you, no, that's not necessary, Sergeant. Just will you talk to him? No problem. And I was able to resolve it because, again, I'll go back to our assumptions thing, Andy. He made certain assumptions about this cop. He's driving like a jerk because he's a jerk. And this guy and the cop is thinking, I need to get there now. Like, I need to get there 2 minutes ago. So there's all those assumptions are going on at the same time. And I think if we all just kind of just discussed it and we understood where everybody is coming from, and that's that's not a law enforcement tip. That's a life tip. You know what I mean? You never know when you're coming across somebody what they're dealing with.
Right, right. Well, one of the things that I really like to talk about on the show is de-escalation. Do you have any tips from either your personal experience or your, law enforcement experience? What can you share with us about de-escalation?
You may find yourself in a situation, and I try and tell my son, he's at that middle school age where I'm just kind of like, don't find yourself in that situation. But if you do find yourself in that situation, remove yourself from that situation, no matter what it is, because it's not going to end well. And my mother used to always tell me, you didn't do anything. You're guilty just by being there. So like when I was a kid, we had high school, we had a lot of fights and stuff. And like, you'll see it today now where there's a fight in a school and all the kids have the cell phone cameras, I knew my mother trained me well. If you see a fight breaking out, get out, because if they get in trouble, you're going to get in trouble for standing there and they're going to think you're a part of it. And that was an important lesson. I try and tell my son that all the time. Listen, stuff's going on, remove yourself out of the situation. But, de-escalation is tough in the civilian world. I know how to de-escalate stuff in the police world. That's easy. But in the civilian world, I don't know. It's being able to communicate, I think, is number one. Understanding that, listen, your body language says a lot about you. If you're in a position where you're like, you got the boxer stance, somebody's going to interpret that as you're ready to go. Whereas if I have my hands up like this, no, I don't need no trouble. Somebody may back off. So I think it's all about approaching each situation delicately at a point where like you can remove yourself safely. I don't know. It all comes back to like middle school where like, just get away. Don't deal with it. That guy's a jerk. Avoid him like the plague,
Yeah, I like that, and I'm really glad that you brought up how nonverbal communication is really important in like really any sort of interaction. So yeah, I mean that's good. Like how you need to be cognizant of how you're standing, what you're saying, where you are, those sorts of things when interacting with the police and anybody else on a daily basis. So yeah, I get that. That's good advice.
That's one of the biggest things that we look for anytime. Like, it could be a simple shoplifting call, and we get the guy down the street. We're looking for those body cues because if he's doing one of these numbers, he's ready to run. You know what I mean? Or if he's blading his body off, he's ready to fight. So we are constantly in that, like I said, that defensive posture. Even if we're talking to you nice as cream corn, we're looking at you like this guy's ready to fight, and we try and avoid that at all costs.
Right. And that gives you a lot of cues as to, okay, this is what I have to do next. This guy's kind of blading back, or oh, he's reaching for his pocket, that sort of thing. And that's gonna set things off, I'm sure.
It's like playing a sport. You want to anticipate what your adversary is going to do. I want to anticipate, is he gonna, playing soccer, is he gonna go pass it or is he gonna shoot the ball? The same way with us. So I'm trying to anticipate what you're gonna do before you do it.
Yeah, and that's all just to keep everybody safe and to understand what's going to come next and that sort of thing, right?
Yep.
All right. So, kind of as we wrap up here, can you share a story with us about something that happened in your career that you were like, "Man, this is why I get up every day. This is why I do my job. This is why I'm an officer." Is there something like that you can share with us on a positive note?
There's been a lot of cases where I got back to the station and I just sat in my cruiser and said, "Wow, that was cool." Many of those stories I can't share with you, Andy. But there was one case in particular a couple of years ago. I was the street boss. It was towards the end of the shift, and it was a domestic. It was a domestic violence call, and they lived in an apartment. They were immigrants from Russia, and he tuned her up good, man. And it was me and the patrolman that was with Ray at the time. We were the first ones on scene and just hysterical, just trying to get her to calm down and talk to her and stuff like that. And, and she had no idea where he went. He took off. So we're like, all right, let's figure out where he went. Where's his cell phone? You know, can we track him? Find my location? We couldn't find him. Couldn't find him. She's in the bedroom. She finds his passport's missing.
Oh,
So we're like, oh, wait a second, passport's missing. We call up the state police, Logan Airport, and say, listen, this is just we had no idea. This is just a wing and a prayer. This is the name of the guy. Is there any way you can check the manifest records for flights or anything like that? And so, oh, we'll get back to you. We're like, oh, Ray, so we'll never hear from them again. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, they called us back. Yep, he's on a flight. The flight takes off in 25 minutes and such a thing. And we were like, no, it was a connecting flight to Russia. So I don't remember where he was going first. It was somewhere in the United States, and then it was a connecting, or maybe it was LaGuardia, I think. And so anyway, it's like, yeah, can you get him? They went on to the plane. The plane had already been on, and the state police grabbed him, pulled him off. And it was just, that was like one of the greatest moments where like me and Ray were just so relieved that like he didn't get away. You know, it was one of those things, and because she was bad. She went to the hospital and she was in there for a while, and it was one of those really sensitive cases that like, and we put him away for a long time, you know, and it was just so satisfying that he didn't get away, and you know, because we would have never saw him again.
right.
We would have never saw him. He would have got on that flight. He would have been, you know, and instead, luckily, the state police, they did their due diligence, and it was a great team effort. So that's probably maybe one of the examples.
Awesome. I'm glad you got him. Well, if people want to know more about you and what you're doing with your community with the Brookline Police Department, where can people find you online?
So social media is our biggest outlet. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. YouTube is like mostly like our videos, like our stuff that we put out in terms of videos. But like, follow us, and it's Brookline MAPD on most of them, I think. And follow us, and we love the social media interaction. We love hearing people's thoughts. One of the things I do is fact or fiction,
Mhm.
and this isn't centric to Brookline. The first one that we ever did was you have to wait 24 hours before you report someone missing,
Mm.
because everyone thinks it's like, I don't know if it's on TV or something like that.
It's
But
a
it was like
TV
this,
thing. Yep.
yeah. So like it was like everybody thinks that. So that was our first fact or fiction, and we got a really cool response from that. So I try and pump those out. The hardest thing, though, Andy, is coming up with an idea for it. Like, what do people, because I know policing, what do people don't know? So, like, from your listeners, if people have suggestions, and shoot you an email and just say, listen, I've always wondered about X. And then maybe we can address it on Fact or Fiction. But I pump those out on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. So
I like your fact and fiction stuff. I've watched it. I watched a bunch of your stuff on Instagram. That's where I found you. So yeah, man, I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate the what you're doing on social media, trying to do community building, and also what you and your fellow officers are doing there in your area, man. God bless you. I appreciate you.
thank you so much, Andy. I really appreciate that. This is you have a great thing. I've been watching a lot of your stuff, and I'm really impressed. I've actually read your book too, so
Oh, cool.
I
Thank you.
appreciate that. Yeah, was a really good informative read.
I appreciate that.